In the hallowed halls of the University of Chicago Law School, a legal titan met an unexpected force. Judge Richard Pausner, a judicial legend with a reputation for shredding weak arguments, dismissed Representative Jasmine Crockett as a mere politician playing lawyer. But when the Texas Congresswoman stepped to the microphone, armed with a stack of legal briefs and unshakable resolve, she didn't just respond. She delivered a masterclass that left Pausner speechless and redefined her legacy. Welcome to Capitol Debate Files, where we unpack the clashes that reshape power and perception. This is the showdown that turned a Congresswoman into a legal icon, saga of intellect, evidence, and triumph. The Grand Conference Hall at the University of Chicago Law School was a crucible of anticipation, every seat filled with law students, professors, and legal journalists hanging on the edge of a moment. At the podium sat Judge Richard Pausner, an 84-year-old judicial colossus whose 3,000 opinions and 40 books had cemented him as one of America's sharpest legal minds. His piercing gaze, notorious for dismantling flimsy arguments, now carried a hint of disdain. Moments earlier, he'd brushed off Representative Jasmine Crockett, a Texas Democrat, as just a politician with a law degree, implying her legal credentials were more theater than substance. But as Crockett rose, clutching a meticulously organized folder of legal documents, the room sensed a storm brewing. "Judge Pausner," she began, her voice calm yet commanding, "you've questioned my legitimacy as a lawyer. Let's have an honest conversation about what legal expertise really means." The hall fell silent, electrified. What unfolded next wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a seismic reckoning that would echo through legal academia. Pausner was no ordinary adversary. For over 3 decades on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, he'd shaped modern jurisprudence with a blend of razor-sharp intellect and unapologetic candor. His books on law and economics were required reading. His opinions taught in every major law school. Admirers hailed his clarity. Critics called him arrogant. But all agreed, when Pausner spoke, the legal world listened. Yet he harbored a deep skepticism of political lawyers, elected officials who, in his view, wielded their law degrees as props while chasing votes over legal rigor. "Politicians trade principle for expediency," he'd said in his keynote, titled "The Decline of Legal Thought and Political Discourse," a direct jab at figures like Crockett. Across the stage stood Crockett, 43, a rising star from Texas's 30th District. Before Congress, she'd forged a formidable career as a civil rights attorney, battling systemic injustice in Texas courtrooms for 15 years. A University of Houston Law Center graduate, she'd won cases that protected marginalized communities, earning a reputation for precision under pressure. Yet her shift to politics invited skepticism from legal purists like Pausner, who saw her congressional role as a departure from serious lawyering. What they didn't know, and Pausner would soon learn, was that Crockett never stopped practicing. Quietly, she handled pro bono cases, tackling constitutional and civil rights issues with a rigor that rivaled career litigators. The symposium, Law and Politics in Modern America, was meant to explore how legal reasoning intersects with policy. Pausner's speech had set a combative tone, decrying politicians who distort the law for political gain. When the Q&A opened, Crockett stepped up, her first question a surgical strike. She asked about a recent Supreme Court ruling on constitutional interpretation, citing specific precedents with lawyerly precision. Pausner's response was dismissive. "Politicians rarely grasp the nuances of constitutional law," he said, implying her query was more posturing than substance. Undeterred, she fired off a second question, this time on federal appellate procedures and their impact on pending legislation. Again, Pausner waved it off, suggesting she misunderstood how courts actually work. Then came the moment that stunned the room. Fixing his gaze on Crockett, Pausner leaned into the mic. "Congresswoman, let's be frank. You're what I'd call a pretend lawyer. You have the degree, but you've traded legal rigor for political games. I doubt you've seen the inside of a courtroom in years." Gasps rippled through the hall. Professors shifted uncomfortably. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances. This wasn't academic critique. It was a public challenge to Crockett's integrity. A lesser figure might have bristled or deflected. Instead, Crockett smiled faintly, walked back to her seat and retrieved her thick folder. The room braced for impact. "Judge Pausner," she said, returning to the mic, her tone steady but laced with resolve, "you've made serious claims about my legal work, or lack thereof. I'd like to respond not with words but with evidence." She opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents organized with the precision of a seasoned litigator, color-coded, tabbed, and court-ready. "You said I haven't stepped into a courtroom in years. Let's start with Henderson versus Texas Department of Education, argued before the 5th Circuit 3 months ago." Holding up a brief, she continued, "This is my work 47 case citations, original analysis on the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and arguments that won a unanimous ruling. Pausner's dismissive smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. She didn't stop there. Pulling another document, she said, 6 months ago I led Martinez versus Dallas County in federal district court, challenging voting procedures that harmed minority communities. This motion for a preliminary injunction, which I drafted, leaned on Supreme Court precedent, statistical data, and the Voting Rights Act. The judge granted it and praised its clarity. The audience was riveted, students scribbling, journalists typing furiously. Crockett reached for a third file, thicker still. Last year I took on Ramirez versus Department of Homeland Security, a pro bono immigration case. This 89-page brief explores asylum protections and constitutional due process, introducing arguments never before presented in federal court. The judge called it exemplary scholarship and ruled for my client. Pausner, a man who'd spent decades judging legal work, leaned forward, his eyes locked on the documents. The weight of Crockett's evidence was undeniable. Active litigation, complex constitutional analysis, and victories at the highest levels. She wasn't done. You also claimed I don't understand how courts function, she said, pulling a stack of filings. In the past 2 years, while serving full-time in Congress, I've argued motions in federal courts across Texas, Louisiana, and Illinois. I've won injunctions, defeated dismissals, and appealed rulings successfully, all pro bono for clients who can't afford top-tier counsel. The room was silent, the gravity of her work sinking in. Pausner polished his glasses, a telltale sign, colleagues knew, of deep reflection. Part 2. Capitol Debate Files. The University of Chicago Law School's Grand Conference Hall was a pressure cooker of stunned silence. Every eye riveted on Rep. Jasmine Crockett as she stood at the microphone, her folder of legal briefs a testament to her unshakable credibility. Judge Richard Pausner, the judicial giant who'd moments earlier branded her a pretend lawyer, sat frozen, his earlier arrogance replaced by a flicker of intrigue. Crockett's methodical takedown, stacked with court filings, unanimous rulings, and pro bono victories, had already rocked the room. But the Texas Congresswoman wasn't just defending her credentials. She was about to deliver a final blow that would leave one of America's greatest legal minds humbled and redefine what it means to be a lawyer in the modern era. The stakes were sky high, and Crockett was ready to close the case. She reached into her folder one last time, pulling out a pristine bound document that carried the unmistakable seal of the U.S. Supreme Court. Judge Pausner, she said, her voice steady but electric with purpose, you questioned my engagement with the highest levels of the judiciary. 3 weeks ago, I filed this petition for certiorari in Thompson versus Federal Bureau of Prisons. The hall gasped audibly. Filing a Supreme Court petition is a Herculean task, demanding mastery of constitutional law and procedural precision. This brief, she continued, holding it aloft, tackles Eighth Amendment violations in federal prisons, weaving new constitutional arguments through circuit splits and 60 years of precedent. It was accepted by the court's clerk without a single correction. Pausner's eyes widened, his hand pausing mid-motion as he adjusted his glasses. The weight of her words hit like a gavel. A Supreme Court filing, executed flawlessly, was no small feat. It was the kind of work that defined legal careers. Students in the audience scribbled furiously. Professors exchanged whispers of disbelief. Crockett pressed on, her tone unwavering. This isn't about politics, Judge. It's about law at its most rigorous, researching, drafting, and arguing at the pinnacle of our system, all while serving in Congress and representing clients who'd otherwise be voiceless. Pausner, known for his quick retorts, sat silent, his gaze fixed on the petition as if seeing Crockett for the first time. She pivoted, addressing the broader issue. You called me a fake lawyer, implying politicians can't maintain legal rigor. But these documents, she gestured to the stack, show active litigation, constitutional scholarship, and courtroom wins, all in the last 2 years. This isn't theater. It's the law practiced at its most demanding. The audience was spellbound, sensing a historic shift. Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was challenging a legal establishment that often dismissed non-traditional paths. How many brilliant lawyers, she asked, turning to the crowd, are overlooked because they don't fit the mold of a full-time litigator? How many are discounted for serving in public roles? The room hung on her words, but Crockett saved her sharpest point for Pausner himself. Judge, your own scholarship inspired my work, she said, pulling out a final document. Not a brief, but a legislative draft. This is my Federal Court Efficiency Act, a bill I wrote for Congress. It tackles the judicial bottlenecks you've critiqued in your book, How Judges Think, and your law review articles. It proposes expanding alternative dispute resolution, streamlining discovery with data-driven reforms, and allocating judicial resources based on case complexity, all grounded in your principles of practical, evidence-based law. She handed the document to a student who passed it to the stage. Pausner took it, scanning the pages with a focus that betrayed his growing respect. This bill isn't political posturing, Crockett continued. It's legal reasoning applied to policy, designed to make courts more efficient and just. Every provision is backed by constitutional analysis, empirical data, and your own judicial insights. Pausner's face softened. The man who'd built a career on precision couldn't deny the rigor before him. You've argued for decades that law should solve real problems, not chase theory, she said. That's what I'm doing, blending courtroom advocacy with policymaking to serve justice. The audience sat transfixed, aware they were witnessing a rare moment of intellectual alchemy. Then came the turning point. Pausner, silent for nearly 30 seconds, an eternity for a man known for rapid-fire responses, reached for his microphone. His voice, once sharp and dismissive, was now measured, almost reverent. Congresswoman Crockett, he began, I owe you an apology. The room exhaled, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Pausner, a titan who rarely admitted fault, continued, When I called you a pretend lawyer, I spoke from assumption, not evidence. That's the kind of intellectual laziness I've spent my career condemning. I was wrong and I was unfair. The admission was seismic. Students later described it as the moment Pausner blinked. Crockett nodded graciously but didn't let the moment end there. Judge Pausner, I accept your apology, but this isn't just about us, she said, her voice gaining strength. This exchange exposes a bigger truth. Our profession too often dismisses lawyers who work outside traditional roles. Former prosecutors in Congress, civil rights attorneys in state houses, they're using legal expertise to shape justice in new ways. We need to redefine what a real lawyer is because the law doesn't stop at the courtroom door. Pausner nodded, visibly humbled. You're right, he said softly. I saw a politician and missed the lawyer. That was my mistake. The hall erupted in applause, a standing ovation that echoed the weight of the moment. Crockett had done more than defend her credentials. She'd challenged a legal icon to rethink his biases, and she'd done it with evidence, poise, and unyielding clarity. As the session ended, students mobbed her with questions while professors approached Pausner, who was still leafing through her bill. This is serious work, he told a colleague, his tone one of genuine admiration. The clash, already being live tweeted by journalists, was about to explode beyond the hall, setting the stage for a broader reckoning in legal and political spheres. Part 3, Capitol Debate Files. The Grand Conference Hall at the University of Chicago Law School buzzed with the aftershocks of Reppers Jasmine Crockett's stunning rebuttal to Judge Richard Pausner. The Texas Congresswoman, armed with a folder brimming with court filings and a legislative masterpiece, had just dismantled the judicial titan's claim that she was a pretend lawyer. Her evidence, unanimous Fifth Circuit rulings, a flawless Supreme Court petition, and a bill echoing Pausner's own scholarship, had left the audience in awe, and Pausner himself issuing a rare apology. But the moment wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a spark that ignited a firestorm, reshaping perceptions of Crockett, challenging legal academia's gatekeepers, and sending shockwaves through political and media circles. As the applause faded, the real impact of this clash was just beginning to unfold, proving that one voice grounded in truth could shift the tides of power. Within hours, the confrontation went viral. Clips of Crockett's methodical takedown, juxtaposed with Pausner's humbled apology, flooded social media, amassing 10 million views by night's end. The hashtag Joe Crockett vs. Pausner trended globally, with law students, attorneys, and activists hailing her as a new standard bearer for legal excellence. This is what a real lawyer looks like, tweeted a Yale law professor, sharing a video of Crockett presenting her Supreme Court brief. Legal blogs lit up with Above the Law calling it the most electrifying moment in legal academia since Scalia sparred with Breyer. Even conservative outlets like The Federalist grudgingly praised her rigor, one columnist noting, "Agree or not, Crockett's command of the law is undeniable." The ripple effects hit Washington fast. Crockett's Federal Court Efficiency Act, once a niche proposal, gained sudden traction. Her exchange with Pausner, whose writings on judicial efficiency were practically gospel, lent the bill instant credibility. 3 senior House Judiciary Committee members, including 2 Republicans, signed on as co-sponsors within days, citing her unassailable legal grounding. A Senate version emerged, backed by a former prosecutor turned senator who told Politico, Crockett's work bridges theory and practice like Pausner himself preached. She's the real deal. The bill's prospects soared, with analysts predicting passage by year's end, a testament to how one moment could turn policy into reality. In legal circles, the clash sparked a reckoning. Pausner's apology, a rarity for a man known for intellectual stubbornness, prompted soul-searching among scholars who'd long dismissed lawyers in public roles. At a Harvard Law Symposium, a panel titled Redefining Legal Expertise was hastily added, with Crockett invited as keynote speaker. She exposed a blind spot, said panelist Dr. Anita Patel. We've been too quick to gatekeep who counts as a serious lawyer, ignoring those like Crockett who litigate and legislate with equal skill. Law schools began revising curricula, incorporating case studies on lawyers in non-traditional roles, prosecutors in Congress, public defenders in state houses, many citing Crockett's folder of briefs as inspiration. The media couldn't get enough. CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 replayed the exchange, with Cooper marveling, this wasn't just a win, it was a lesson in how to command respect with facts. MSNBC's Joy Reid dubbed it, the moment the legal old guard got schooled. Even Fox News, rarely friendly to Democrats, ran a segment praising Crockett's poise, with a guest noting, she didn't need to shout. Her work spoke louder than Pausner's critique. The viral clip became a staple in media training workshops, with coaches teaching public figures how to pull a Crockett, deflect attacks with evidence, and redirect to substance without losing composure. Crockett, true to form, refused to bask in the spotlight. On PBS NewsHour, she downplayed the viral hype. This isn't about me or Judge Pausner, she said. It's about proving that legal rigor can thrive in public service. My clients, my constituents, they're why I do this. Her focus on pro bono work, particularly for marginalized communities, struck a chord. Donations to her campaign spiked, with $2 million in small-dollar contributions pouring in, many from first-time donors inspired by her stand. I'm not a lawyer or a voter in Texas, one donor wrote on X, but I gave $50 because Crockett fights for what's right. Pausner, meanwhile, faced his own fallout. Colleagues noted a quieter demeanor at subsequent events, with one telling The New York Times, he's rethinking his assumptions about who can claim legal expertise. In a rare follow-up essay for The Atlantic, Pausner reflected on the clash, writing, Congresswoman Crockett reminded me that intellectual humility is as vital as intellectual rigor. Her work is a model for bridging law and policy. The piece, shared widely, marked a shift in Pausner's public persona, softening his image as an unyielding critic. The broader cultural impact was profound. Advocacy groups like the National Bar Association launched campaigns to highlight unseen lawyers, those working outside traditional firms, from public defenders to policy advocates. A viral video series, Dear Lawyers Like Crockett, showcased attorneys in unconventional roles, each citing her as proof that legal brilliance knows no boundaries. At a high school in Dallas, a debate coach showed the clip to students, saying, this is how you win with preparation, not volume. The moment even inspired a wave of law school applications, with admissions officers noting a surge in essays mentioning Crockett's name. As the symposium's aftermath unfolded, Crockett's star rose not just as a politician but as a legal force. Invitations poured in, keynotes at Yale, Stanford, and the American Bar Association's annual meeting. Yet she remained grounded, telling the Washington Post, I'm still the same lawyer who fought for clients no one else would take. The stage is just bigger now. Her clash with Pausner had done more than silence a critic. It had sparked a movement to rethink who gets to define legal excellence, proving that the law's true power lies in those who wield it for justice. No matter the arena, the University of Chicago Law School's Grand Conference Hall had witnessed a seismic clash, one that left legal titan Judge Richard Pausner humbled and Representative Jasmine Crockett elevated as a beacon of legal brilliance. Her stack of court briefs, a flawless Supreme Court petition, and a bill rooted in Pausner's own scholarship had silenced his claim that she was a pretend lawyer, forcing a rare apology from a man known for intellectual inflexibility. But the impact of that 20-minute showdown didn't fade when the microphones went silent. It exploded into a cultural and political force, reshaping how the legal world views non-traditional lawyers, propelling Crockett's influence to new heights, and sparking a national conversation about expertise, bias, and the power of evidence. This was no fleeting viral moment. It was a legacy-defining stand that would echo for years. The aftermath hit like a tidal wave. By the next morning, the Izimer Crockett vs. Pausner hashtag had surged past 20 million views, with clips of her dismantling Pausner's assumptions dominating every major platform. Legal scholars, students, and even casual viewers dissected her performance, with Vox calling it a masterclass in intellectual dominance, delivered with grace. The Wall Street Journal, rarely aligned with Crockett's politics, ran an op-ed titled The Congresswoman Who Outlawyered a Legend, praising her unassailable command of constitutional nuance. On X, a viral thread from a Georgetown law student broke down her briefs, noting, this isn't just lawyering, it's lawyering at an elite level, all while serving full-time in Congress. Crockett's Federal Court Efficiency Act, once a footnote in legislative debates, became a Capitol Hill juggernaut. Pausner's public endorsement, unprecedented for a man who shunned political involvement, gave it rocket fuel. Her bill is a serious application of judicial scholarship, he told CNN, clutching a copy of the draft Crockett handed him. Within weeks, the House Judiciary Committee fast-tracked hearings, and a bipartisan coalition of 12 senators, including 3 former prosecutors, co-sponsored a Senate version. Crockett's work is what legal policy should be, one GOP senator told Politico. It's practical, data-driven, and rooted in real courtroom experience. By spring, the bill passed both chambers, a rare legislative win credited to Crockett's ability to turn a public clash into policy momentum. The Legal Academy felt the tremors just as deeply. Pausner's apology, a moment of humility from a figure known for intellectual arrogance, forced a reckoning. At a Yale Law Conference, a panel titled Beyond the Courtroom Redefining Legal Mastery drew 2,000 attendees. With Crockett's name invoked repeatedly, she shattered the myth that you can't be a serious lawyer outside traditional practice, said panelist Professor Maria Chen. Law schools from NYU to Berkeley revamped courses, adding modules on lawyers and public roles, senators drafting justice reforms, advocates shaping policy. Crockett's briefs became required reading, with her Thompson vs. Federal Bureau of Prisons petition hailed as a model of constitutional innovation. It's not just a brief, a Stanford professor told students. It's a blueprint for blending law and public good. The media frenzy was relentless. The New Yorker profiled Crockett as the lawyer-politician redefining both roles, detailing her pro bono work for marginalized clients. On Meet the Press, she deflected personal praise, focusing on her mission. "This isn't about me proving Pausner wrong," she said. "It's about showing that legal expertise can serve justice in courtrooms and Congress alike." Her composure inspired a wave of media training programs dubbed Crockett Clinics, teaching public figures to counterattacks with facts and poise. A Republican strategist admitted to The Hill, "She's set a new bar. You can't just yell or deflect anymore. You need receipts like hers." Crockett's influence reached beyond elites. Grassroots support skyrocketed, with her campaign raising $3.5 million in small donations, fueled by everyday Americans moved by her stand. A single mom from Dallas tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett fights for people like me. Free legal work, real policies. She's my hero." Community colleges and high schools began showing the clash in civics classes, with one Chicago teacher noting, "My students saw a black woman lawyer take on a legend and win with smarts. That's life-changing." The National Bar Association launched a scholarship in her name, funding law students committed to public service, with applications citing her as their inspiration. Pausner, meanwhile, underwent a quiet transformation. At a subsequent lecture, he opened with a nod to Crockett, saying, "I learned recently that assumptions can blind even the most experienced minds." His next book, Rethinking Legal Expertise, dedicated a chapter to her, calling her a bridge between law's theory and its practice. Colleagues noted he began mentoring younger lawyers in public roles, a shift attributed to Crockett's impact. "She changed him," a former clerk told Slate. "He's less dogmatic now, more open to new definitions of legal work." The cultural ripple effects were profound. The "You Want Lawyers Like Crockett" campaign grew into a movement, spotlighting attorneys in non-traditional roles, public defenders turned mayors, corporate counsel advocating for equity. A viral TED Talk by a former prosecutor cited Crockett saying, "She proved the law isn't confined to courtrooms. It's wherever justice needs a voice." Media outlets, pressured by public demand, began adopting fair debate guidelines, with CNN and MSNBC piloting formats that penalized excessive interruptions. A Media Matters report noted a 30% drop in combative exchanges on cable news, crediting the Crockett standard for prioritizing substance over spectacle. A year later, Crockett's clash with Pausner was cemented as a landmark. The American Bar Association honored her with its Thurgood Marshall Award, recognizing her as a lawyer whose work redefines justice. At the ceremony, she spoke humbly, "I'm just a Texas girl who loves the law and believes it can change lives. If this moment inspires one person to fight for what's right, it's enough." But it was more than enough. It was a revolution. From Capitol Hill to classrooms, Crockett had redefined what it means to be a lawyer, proving that true expertise isn't bound by titles but forged in dedication, evidence, and fearless conviction. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a debate with Richard Pausner. She rewrote the rules of legal and political influence. Her clash proved that brilliance thrives in unexpected places, challenging biases and inspiring a generation to demand more from their leaders and their laws. From passing transformative legislation to sparking a movement for fairer discourse, Crockett's stand reminds us that truth, backed by preparation, can shift history. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen someone underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Join us next time for more Capitol Debate Files, where we uncover the battles that redefine power. Stay sharp, stay engaged, and keep fighting for truth.